The Legend of Zelda series has so many different aspects that make it amazing, from the simple but engaging stories, the many fun items to use, and the absolutely phenomenal soundtracks. But in my opinion, the most important and fun part of any Zelda game is the dungeons that grace each game. Over the past couple of months, I've delved into all the main dungeons of the Wind Waker, where in each episode I reviewed the dungeon and then gave it a standard tier list letter grade. This right here is a compilation of every single one of those videos. I didn't cover the Savage Labyrinth because it's a side dungeon, nor did I cover Ganon's Tower because eventually I'll have a video coming out covering all the final dungeons in each individual Zelda game. This one is quite a long one, so I'll cut right to the chase as we get into every single dungeon from The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, ranked and reviewed. Even though Wind Waker isn't my favorite Zelda game, it's still got a phenomenal opening. The game begins with a story told by these murals of a time when the kingdom of Hyrule was prosperous. One day though, some evil man took over the kingdom and shrouded it in darkness. But when all hope seemed lost, a certain green-clothed lad with the Blade of Evil's Bane showed up and saved the day. Hooray! Everything is saved and everything is fine! That is until darkness swept back over Hyrule. The people begged for the Hero of Time to return, but he was nowhere to be seen. If you somehow can't tell, this is the legend of the Hero of Time, which goes through the events of Ocarina of Time. I've always really liked this opening, and the music that plays through it is really great to listen to. After the story is done, we come over to Outset Island, which is one of my favorite starting locations in all of Zelda. Some girl's looking for her brother with this awesome looking telescope, and it turns out she's Link's sister. Of course, Link is found sleeping on a little balcony, as he normally does. Seriously though, Link sleeps in a lot of these games. A Link to the Past, Ocarina of Time, and Breath of the Wild, just to name a few. Link's sister's name is Aryll, and she's here to celebrate Link's birthday. We get told that Link's grandma is waiting for him at the house, so we should probably head over there first. Anytime Link isn't in his classic green fit always feels special, and I really like this outfit he's got on. I also just love exploring this place so much. It's got such a comforting and homey vibe to it, with unique characters roaming the entire place. I mean, it mainly just delves down to me flexing my parkour skills on these little kids, but it's still great. Once we get to Link's grandma's estate, we can find her on the top floor of the house. She gifts us with the hero's clothes, meaning that we're a man. Back in the day, the people of the island would also learn how to use a sword around here, but there's only one person on the island with any sword knowledge, and his name is Orca. Grandma says though that we should head back to Aryll before we do any of that sword training. When we get back to Aryll, she compliments Link's amazing outfit and gives us a birthday present being her most trusty telescope. Now listen, I know that this thing isn't that useful, but it's just awesome to have and it fits with the theme of the game. We test out the telescope as Arito is delivering some mail when all of a sudden a big bird carrying a woman flies over Outset Island. Then a whole pirate ship comes around shooting cannonballs at the bird that eventually hit it, making the girl fall out of its grasp. The girl fell into the forest, and of course we gotta go and save her. First though, we need a sword to even enter the place, so it's on to Orca's home we go. Orca gives you a whole combat tutorial for the Wind Waker, which I'm honestly a big fan of. I know a lot of people find it pretty simple, and while it is, I just find it super satisfying to pull off. One of the reasons it's so satisfying is the cartoony sound effects that play whenever you pull off a successful hit. Yeah, sometimes it also just boils down to hitting A whenever it pops up on screen, but the combat in Zelda hasn't ever been what the series is known for. After our training is complete, Orca is nice enough to give us the hero sword, which is a blade infused with the power to grow stronger. Now with the sword in our possession, we can start making our way towards the forest. As we climb even higher to reach the forest, we come across a bridge that takes us to the entrance to the forest. When we walk in, we can see the girl stuck in a tree. In our path to her though, there's a bokoblin in our way. On the right of the forest, there's a giant boulder that we can't quite reach right now, but later in the game, when we have bombs, we can blow it up, leading to a fairy fountain. There's many great fairies in this game who increase your wallet size, and this very first one allows us to hold up to 1,000 rupees, which is pretty awesome. As we continue through the forest, some birds just think it would be a cool idea to drop more bokoblins on us, which I don't particularly appreciate. After taking them out, the girl wakes up and falls out of the tree. We chat with her for a bit as the pirates who were shooting at the bird come to meet up with Tetra. Oh, thank goodness I can call her Tetra now instead of the girl. I'm getting some PTSD. As we exit the forest, Aryll is waiting on the other side of the bridge for us when all of a sudden that big bird that was carrying Tetra comes over and steals Aryll. Link tries his best to save her, but instead he nearly ends up dying, only being saved by Tetra. With Link's sister being stolen, he of course wants to save her, and the pirates seem to be our only hope. As we try to convince them to let us go along with them, the Rito from earlier butts in on the conversation to make them feel guilty and let us go along with them. He pretty much says that this bird has been capturing young girls with long ears to take them to the Forsaken Fortress. Tetra says that we're unequipped to even go there and that we should at least pack a shield if we want to go with her. Luckily for us though, there was a shield back at Link's grandma's house, so let's try over there. When we get there and climb to the top floor though, the shield isn't there. Turns out grandma took the shield as she wants to hand it to Link personally. It's a very sad moment as Link's grandma weeps over her lost granddaughter. Well, now that we're fully equipped thanks to the Outset Island residents, we can start making our way to the Forsaken Fortress. This cutscene is one of my favorites in the game just because of how funny it is. The ship sets sail for the Forsaken Fortress as Link waves goodbye to all his friends and his grandma. Then in this super heartfelt moment, moment, Tetra just starts making fun of him for getting so emotional. And I mean, come on, this waving animation is hilarious. Once we get to control the game again, we get to explore the pirate ship, but the pirates suggest we go down below to meet up with Nico. Once we meet up with Nico, he gives us a little challenge to partake in. When he steps up on this button, a bunch of platforms rise out of the ground and lanterns descend from the ceiling. Everything only stays in place for a little bit though, and according to Nico, it's gonna take one whole year before we're even able to make it through. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, I really suck at this game, and apparently I can't even do something as simple as platforming. Come on, Jickbean, your favorite game is Super Mario Galaxy 2, surely you can do some platforming in Wind Waker. I'm super ashamed by how long it took me to do the first time, so please roast me in the comments. After making it to the other side on the very first try, no doubt, Nico gives us access to a chest which contains the spoils bag, which we can use to hold items dropped by enemies. After getting that, we hear a call from Tetra telling us that we finally arrived at the Forsaken Fortress. If we go back outside, it's nighttime and Tetra is chilling in the crow's nest. While writing the script, I called this the poop deck because haha funny, but I completely forgot it was called the crow's nest. Just thought I'd share that with you so I can have an excuse to say poop deck. Anyways, Tetra shows us the Forbidden Fortress, and at first glance, this place looks like it would be pretty cool to explore. We have to make it to one of the higher rooms in the dungeon in order to save our sister. Tetra's not really too sure how to get up there, but then all of a sudden she gets an idea. In another absolutely hilarious cutscene, the pirates stick Link into a barrel and plan on catapulting him up to the room. Gosh, Wind Waker is by far the funniest Zelda game. The launch doesn't necessarily go according to plan as we lose our sword and fall into the Forsaken Fortress. As always with these dungeon reviews, let's start by taking a look at the dungeon theme. The Forsaken Fortress has a military sounding theme, and it's pretty simple. There's both a snare and a bass drum playing throughout the entirety of the track, and a bassoon joins them a little while into it. Finally, there's this tense sound that, believe it or not, adds tension to the track. Just like all of the Wind Waker's music, I like this track a good bit, and it fits with the location super well. When we get out of the water that we fell into, Link hears a voice that's coming from his pockets. This right here is a little stone that allows us to speak with people like Tetra even when they're not with us. She doesn't really say much except to get our sword as we truly start this hated dungeon. Since we don't have our sword, the main gimmick of the Forsaken Fortress is to use these barrels to sneak around. You don't have to use them to stealth through everything, but they'll be your best bet. For the first little bit though, we need to dodge some searchlights, but if you get caught, you'll be thrown in jail. Yeah, this happens every single time you get caught, and while it sounds like a neat idea, it's just not fun. We can escape the cell by taking a little crawl space behind the spot. Once we get out of our cell, we immediately spot a chest containing the dungeon map. Throughout the dungeon, there's a bunch of hanging lanterns that we can swing across in order to get to new areas. Before we can make our way up to Errol though, we'll need to take out the searchlights that caught us earlier. One kind of positive thing about the dungeon is that it's semi-open world, as you don't really have to go into a lot of rooms. That kind of makes it a little complicated to talk about each of the rooms, but honestly, most of them don't really have anything of note in them. As I said a little bit ago, we need to go and turn off all of these searchlights, and this is probably the best part of the dungeon this time around. At each of the searchlights is a bokoblin controlling it, and since we don't have our sword, we have to think outside the box. There's some pots containing some wooden sticks that we can use to beat the bokoblins up. I think that being able to pick up random weapons is super cool, but it's pretty underdeveloped in this game. It's only really used in the early game, and I think it spices up the gameplay a decent bit. There's only 2 searchlights that you have to go and take out, and once they're out of the way, you can make your way up to your sister. After going through a few rooms, we'll eventually come across one with a couple of moblins and a big door. You'll just have to simply stealth by them using barrels, and let's just say, these fellas aren't the smartest enemies in Zelda. Seriously, you know there's not supposed to be a barrel here, why are you not checking it out a bit further? Through the door, we can come across some stairs that lead us to yet another moblin we need to stealth on by. Ugh, and this guy takes so freaking long to pass by. Seriously, this one moblin takes up a solid minute of your time, which is super boring. Past him, we can continue climbing and saddle across some gaps. This is where the searchlights you take out would normally get you, and past that, we can finally get our sword. One problem though, we get locked into an arena by some spikes and have to fight a green bokoblin. This is the boss of the Forsaken Fortress for this first run through, and it's something alright. He dies in like 2 seconds, and once he's defeated, we can finally go save our sister. As we walk into this room, there's a jail cell containing Errol alongside a few other girls. Before we can save her though, the big bird from earlier steals us away and takes us up to Ganondorf. I mean, I wonder who this guy could be. The dude just tilts his head and we get flung into the ocean. And that's the end of the first time at the Forsaken Fortress. This is far from a strong start to the Wind Waker's dungeons, and if you only came here this one time, it would easily be the worst in the series. It has some decent ideas, but I just don't feel like the ideas are executed super well. The whole stealth idea just doesn't work well here, and I like stealth in games. There's not even a cool boss fight at the end when you finally do get your sword. We're about to experience a Jickbean first, because the first time you visit the Forsaken Fortress is getting an F tier. Sorry to all you fans of this portion of the game, but I just do not have a fun time here at all. There's no redeeming qualities here, and it's easily one of the weakest points in Wind Waker. Luckily though, we don't have to wait too long to come back to this place. After doing the Forsaken Fortress the first time, we'll be awoken by some random red ship. This right here is the King of Red Lions, and he wants to help us out. He tells us a bit about Ganon and hypes Link up for the adventure to save his sister. Unfortunately, we can't really go anywhere right now because the King of Red Lions is without a sale. Luckily for us though, Windfall Island just so happens to be a place with a bunch of traders who might have exactly what we're looking for. Windfall Island has slowly started to become one of my favorite little towns in Zelda. I really think the theme of the island also helps me love it so much. It gives off little town vibes and fits the cartoony art style of the Wind Waker. There's so many interesting characters on this island and fun activities to partake in. In the back corner of the island is a little shop that doesn't look like it's doing well. This fella right here is Zurani, and he really wants to open up his own shop, but unfortunately he's a bit too poor. He pleads with Link to give him 80 rupees to open up shop, and since I'm just the nicest person ever, I decided to give him the money. In exchange for those rupees, he gives us the boat sail, which allows us to sail on the beautiful seas. While we can now head over to Dragon Roost Island, there's still a couple of things we can get done here. If we go to the Windfall Village Jail, because of course it has one of those, we can find our old pal Tingle sitting behind bars. As always, he believes that we're one of the fairy folk that he's been looking for, and apparently he's been mistaken for some troublemaker. Yeah, that's what they all say, pal. Well, I guess we can just let this old fart out of his cell by hitting a conveniently placed switch in the corner. Tingle's super thankful that we freed him, and he's kind enough to give us the Tingle bottle, which allows us to send messages to other players using Miiverse. It's a complete shame that this is useless though. Thanks a lot, Miyamoto. In the original GameCube version of Wind Waker, you didn't get the Tingle bottle because unfortunately Miiverse hadn't been created yet. Instead, Tingle gave you the Tingle Tuner, which was a device that allowed you to actually use Tingle with a Game Boy Advance. I'm not too knowledgeable on the feature, but it seems like a really cool and unique item. The reason we actually need to free him though is because there's actually a crawl space behind this box. Now let me tell you something, this crawl space is about as confusing as the very first time I went through Ocarina of Time's Water Temple. It's a huge labyrinth with so many dead ends and trapdoors that make you have to restart the whole area. Yes, I know it's a skill issue, but not having this place memorized kinda makes it a pain to go through. Eventually though, you'll reach a room with a chest containing the Picto Box. This thing can obviously take pictures and is pretty fun to use. You can only take black and white photos right now, but there's actually a side quest we can do in order to take colored pictures. Through this door that has a Picto Box above it, we can find this fine chap named Lenzo who has a whole gallery of pictures he's taken. If we go back downstairs, he'll ask Link to be his assistant and he'll give you 3 different tasks. The tasks he give are decently vague, but if you think a bit, you can definitely figure out what he wants you to photograph. My only real gripe with this side quest is that you have to have a super specific angle in order for Lenzo to accept the picture. After doing all 3 tasks, which involve stalking a lot of Windfall Island citizens, Lenzo upgrades your Picto Box to the Deluxe Picto Box. This allows us to take pictures in full color this time. Thanks Lenzo, you're my bestest friend. There's still quite a few minor things we can do here, but let's head on back to our noble ship and give him his sail. One of the best parts about Wind Waker is exploring the ocean, even though there's not really a whole lot to do on the open waters. Yeah, there's a lot of random little islands and enemy camps, but they'll usually only give you a piece of heart or a map chart. They're honestly good enough rewards to go and explore everywhere though. Personally, I didn't make sure I explored every single island I saw, but there were plenty of times where I had a sudden itch to explore. Nonetheless, if we follow this arrow, we'll eventually make it to Dragon Roost Island. The Dragon Roost Island theme is one of the most well-known Zelda songs ever. It's so upbeat and heavy on the percussion with a groovy pan flute melody. Before we even do anything, we learn at the top of the island is a dragon known as the Spirit of the Skies named Valoo. Mr. Red Lion says that we need to go retrieve Din's Pearl from the dragon and we should ask the Rito people who live here how to get to him. To cement himself as an even more amazing companion, the King of Red Lions gifts us with our patented Zelda musical item, the Wind Waker. It ain't no ocarina, but I think it's fun to use. It's a lot more complicated than the ocarina as you even get to use different time signatures, which I think is pretty neat. Blocking our way to the Rito is a bunch of big boulders that we can blow up using bomb flowers, which are just sitting here. Seriously though, why do people in Zelda just have these things lying around? They're dangerous, and what if some little kid starts messing with them and blows themselves up? Once all the boulders are blown up, we come across Quill, who we met at the beginning of the game. We catch him up to speed on how things are going, and he offers us to meet the Rito tribe's chief. Well, of course I would, Quill. Me and Joe go way back. When we pull up to their little cave, we learn from the chief that Valoo has become very violent instead of his natural calm self. Apparently, when a Rito child reaches adulthood, they have to go up to Valoo and receive a scale from the dragon. Doing this grants them their wings, so believe it or not, it's pretty important for Valoo to be calm instead of violent. While the Rito can't think of a way to solve this issue, there's also some other problems that they have, such as the chief's son Kamali possibly giving up on getting his wings. The chief says that there's something he wants to give us, but another Rito named Medley has it. This other Rito also gives us a delivery bag and says that it may be of some help as they go and try to deal with Valoo. This place has a couple of floors in it, and on the second floor we can find Medley, who's just one of the cutest characters in a Zelda game. Just look at her, she's so adorable. She gives us the father's letter that we can deliver to Kamali, and she asks us a little favor. She wants us to come to Dragon Roost Cavern after we deliver the letter. Anything for you, you cutie patootie. Also up here, there's a little mini game where we have to throw the right letters into the right place. If you haven't guessed it by now, the Rito and Wind Waker are mainly messengers and they do a dang good job at it. This minigame is honestly a pretty good way at earning rupees, so if you need a rupee farm, definitely come here. After going down this very long hallway, we'll come across Kamali's room. He's holding some little orb, and we fulfill the chief's request by giving him the letter. The letter pretty much just tells him to man up and go get his scale, but Kamali is a wuss and is way too scared to visit the violent Baloo. He does say that he'll go up and collect the scale if Link can find someone to make it past all the obstacles to Baloo. Well, now it's time to go head on over to the entrance to Dragon Roost Cavern and meet up with Medli. She really wants to be like Prince Kamali's grandmother, who was apparently a legendary attendant of Baloo. She believes that if she can become as amazing as her, she'll be able to help Kamali overcome his fears. In order to do that, though, she has to get to the small shrine near the peak of Dragon Roost, but she needs Link's help getting up there. We have to use the wind in order to get her up there, and while it can be timed with the wind as is, there's actually a way to control the wind. On the edge of Dragon Roost Island, there's a stone with some markings of a song. If we pull out the Wind Waker and play what's written on the stone, we'll learn the Wind's Requiem, which allows us to control the direction of wind. When you do that, some random frog named Zepho shows up and claims to be the god of the winds. He mentions his brother Cyclos before peacing out, never to be seen until we see him again. Okay, now back to throwing Medli up to Dragon Roost Cavern. Once we throw her up there, she's in a hurry, but gives us an empty bottle before she leaves. With the empty bottle, we can grab some of the water next to this big rock, which will come in handy. When we first entered this area, there were a couple of bomb flower plants that look like they need water. If we pour the water on them, bomb flowers will sprout and we can use them to blow up this boulder, causing the area to flood. On the other side, there's some statues that have conveniently placed baskets that we can throw bombs in. After doing that, the statues fall and create a pathway leading us into Dragon Roost Cavern. Of course, with every temple review, we always start with talking about the dungeon's music. As much as I would love to say it's a unique and amazing theme to go along with the island's theme, I unfortunately can't. It just sounds like Dodongo's Cavern theme if you were riding Yoshi. Looks like we're back to super boring themes for dungeons now. I know I just said it was kinda boring, but I don't hate this theme. I do think it fits the location pretty well, and it's not an awful track to listen to while exploring the place. Dragon Roost Cavern's first room has a couple of weird looking statues right in front of a mural. We can move the statues, and it turns out they're blocking a pathway to the next room. In here are a couple of bokoblins we need to take out, and let me just say, I love Wind Waker's combat. While at the end of the day you do just kinda button mash for basic enemies, the sound effects make it super satisfying to perform. A cool feature that Wind Waker brings to combat is that there are other weapons you can pick up either from crates or dropped by enemies. For this specific instance, the bokoblin drops some wooden sticks that can be used for some puzzles. There's a couple unlit torches in this room, and if we use the sticks to bring fire over to them, a chest appears containing a small key. Using the small key, we can enter a little hallway that takes us to the central room of the dungeon. Now this place is huge with multiple floors and all sorts of rooms. The only thing we can do right now is platform along the side of the room. Eventually we'll come across the first of many bridges and some keys to fight. On the other side of the bridge is a giant boulder that we can blow up with some nearby bomb flowers to reveal a door. In this next room we get to learn one of the gimmicks of the dungeon. There's water pots all around this room, and if you throw one of the pots into lava, it'll create a platform on the lava. I actually really love the gimmick, even if it is pretty simple. We can use this technique to go over to a chest containing the dungeon map. There's also a ladder in this room leading to a new room, however a scary red choo-choo is blocking the way. The next room has a breakable wall with a bokoblin just waiting to jump scare you. Realistically, how long do you think this guy was waiting here? Using the bokoblin's sword, we can break another wall to open up a new area. There's another breakable wall, but it doesn't look like we can get to it. Luckily though, Link can just chuck the weapons he picks up, allowing us to break the wall, revealing a chest containing a small key. Through another door, we come back to the central room with a boulder blocking our way. Instead of just picking up the bomb flower this time, we have to hit the bomb flowers on the wall with either a pot or some rocks, making them blow up. We can now head through this locked door that was at the beginning of the room. Through the door is a room with a whole lot of red choo-choos and more breakable walls, with one of them already being cracked. Behind the cracked wall are some pots, and in one of them is yet another bokoblin waiting to jump scare you. I really can't with these guys, but I respect how dedicated they are to jumping Link. There's also a stick in here which we can light on fire to burn the other wooden wall, revealing a switch which opens up access to the next area. We actually get sent outside, which I've always thought was pretty cool, and there's another beautiful bridge to cross. There's a ladder on the other side for us to climb and avoid some lava spewing out of the mountain along the way. At the top of the ladder, there's a cargo rock and a platform we can sidle across while dodging more lava from the mountain. There's also a giant boulder, which of course means that there's some bomb flowers nearby that we can use to blow it up. Through the next door is a bunch of movable blocks that we can pull to create a staircase to the next area. In here are some pesky little rats and an elevated area. There's some torch alongside some pots with sticks, and when lit, we can throw it to the other side of the room, burning this wooden wall. There's also a chest right next to the torch containing the compass. Behind that burnt wooden wall, though, is a chest containing a better item, being a small key. With the small key, we can unlock a door and continue climbing outside. After going up a flight of stairs, we can spot a bird's nest, and inside of it is, for some reason, a small key and another Cargarok to fight. Through the next door, we come across some pots filled with sticks that we need to use to transfer flames throughout the area. There's also some keys to fight and a chest containing a joy pendant. Once you light these 2 torches right next to a locked door, it unlocks and we come back to the central room, but this time super high up. There's a pretty long bridge, and on the other side is a door leading to a room with a bokoblin and a bunch of pots. There's also some unlit torches in here that when lit spawn in a chest containing a treasure chart. Now at first you may be confused as there's no way to get out of the room initially, and as it turns out there's a bunch of bokoblins hiding in these pots. I seriously can't take it anymore with all these bokoblins hiding in places. After all the bokoblins are taken out, a door unlocks, taking you to what I used to think was the hardest room in the dungeon. In here there's a bunch of lava and a platform with a magtail on it. This is another room where we have to use the water pots to create platforms across lava. For some stupid reason, I felt the need to try and defeat the magtail before doing anything, which ended up being super annoying. Luckily though, you don't have to really interact with him at all as long as you hit him with a water pot. At the end of the lava river, there's a geyser that will shoot you all the way up to a door. The next room has a couple of big boulders that we have to blow up, with one of them sending us back outside. We end up being super close to Valoo, with one big staircase being all we need to take to get to him. Once we're right in front of him though, it turns out Medley has been captured by a couple of bokoblins. We have a fun fight with them, and after they're defeated, a moblin gets dropped into the arena. He's not difficult either, and once he's taken out, we're able to free Medley. She tells us that some creature is messing with Valoo's tail, and that's why he's been acting up. She's also nice enough to give us the dungeon item, being the grappling hook. We get a little tutorial on how to use the thing, and as we follow the pathway with these things to grapple across, we'll eventually come across a door. In here, there's a bokoblin to piece up, which spawns in a chest below us. We then have to use this awesome feature of cutting the bridge's ropes in order to reach the chest containing a joy pendant. There's also a door down here which takes us back into the central room. In this area, there's a platform that's being held up by some ropes that we can cut. The platform then takes us all the way to the bottom of the central room, where we now have access to a brand new area. There's some finicky platforms in here that we need to jump across to reach a ladder. At the top, there's a locked door that we can unlock using our grappling hook. Through the door is more things to grapple onto, and yet more finicky platforms to jump across, eventually reaching a door. In here we get to fight a magtail, but turns out they don't actually get killed. Instead, they curl up into a little ball, which we can use on the switch that allows us to open up a chest containing the boss key. Oh, sorry, it's the big key. My sincerest apologies to all big key fans. Now we have to painstakingly head all the way back to this room, which I'm sure you definitely remember. We can then use our grappling hook to cross to the other side of the room, where there's a couple of chests containing some goodies and the door leading to the boss room. In this very circular room, there's a giant lava pool in the middle, and out pops the boss of Dragon Roost Cavern, Goma. Yes, just like in Ocarina of Time, the first real boss fight we fight in Wind Waker is Goma, but she's much better this time around. Something that I absolutely love that Wind Waker does, but not the previous 3D Zelda games, is that each main boss has its own unique theme. This one in particular is pretty tense, which is how I felt during the fight. Yes, I know that this fight is pretty easy when you know what you're doing, but I'm a complete buffoon and nearly died in this fight. For the first little bit of the boss fight, you need to use the grappling hook on Valoo's tail in order for a platform to crash onto Goma. After doing that for a decent bit, you'll then need to stun Goma and wail on her. Also, please pray for my frames. Oh, that's really it. Huh. Can you believe I struggled on this for some reason? Man, do I suck at video games. I'll stick to my visual novel murder mystery games, thank you very much. After Goma is defeated, we can collect the dungeon's patented heart container and be teleported back outside. Valoo isn't aggravated anymore, so the nearby area around him becomes a whole lot calmer. We're then immediately greeted by Prince Kamali and Medley. Kamali thanks us for our service, and he's nice enough to give us Din's Pearl before he goes to visit Valoo. And that's a wrap on Dragon Roost Cavern. I gotta say, this wasn't the greatest introduction to Wind Waker dungeons. I'm not the biggest fan of them in the game, but trust me, this one is far from the worst. It's got a couple of decent puzzles, but it just feels like I'm doing the same thing over and over again. The grappling hook sounds like it would be a fun item to use, but in reality, it just makes me miss the hook shot. I do like the music used throughout the dungeon a decent bit though. I'm gonna give Dragon Roost Cavern a grade of C. For having a couple of fun puzzles, some decent combat, and all the repetitiveness you could want, C just feels like the grade best fit for Dragon Roost Cavern. Now that we've collected Din's Pearl from Dragon Roost Cavern, we can start making our way to the Forest Haven. Before we do that though, we gotta head back on over to Windfall Island because there's a few new things to do. First things first, we can learn a new song. You remember that Elvis looking weirdo dancing next to a grave? Well, his name is Tot, and if we whip out our Wind Waker, he'll start hitting these random poses and making the dumbest sounds. Yeah! Yeah! Woo! After matching your Wind Waker with his poses, you'll learn the Song of Passing, which allows you to switch from day to night and night to day. With that, there's one more thing to do, but my goodness, is it both awesome and annoying. There's a building with our old pal Zurani in it, and apparently he's hosting an auction where we can get some awesome items. The auction only happens at night, and there's a whopping 7 people here, which is pretty much all the Windfall Island residents. Zunari will reveal an item, and then you have to have a fun bidding war with all these other lifeless losers. Real talk though, why are all these people bidding on sea charts among other sea related things? As far as I can tell, there's no boats or ships around the island. I don't know, maybe they have like a little canoe or something stored inside of their houses. The main reason we're even doing this whole auction is because we can get a swift sail, which nearly doubles our speed while sailing. I don't know if this is a common issue or not, but I was really struggling to even get the swift sail to be an item up for auction. I probably did about 10 different auctions before it even showed up. Even though it took me a while to get the swift sail, I still really like this side quest. I have a crippling gambling addiction thanks to Luigi, so I find the auctioning fun. Anyways, with the swift sail acquired, we can head on over to the Forest Haven. According to the King of Red Lions, this is a sacred place that's home to one of our old pals, the Deku Tree. As we climb up the island to try and reach the tree, there's Boko Babas blocking the pathway. There's a little river section where we have to jump across some platforms, deal with some Octoroks, and use our grappling hook. Eventually, we'll reach the entrance to the Forest Haven. While I'm not the biggest fan of this game, I will say I really love all the islands you come across in this game. I also like that the forest theme is used later in the game than normally. The Forest Haven also has a nice little musical track to go along with the area. Eventually we'll come across some tree with a face, but oh no, there's some choo-choos on him. If we roll into the tree, we can get the choo-choos off of him and fight them. It's pretty simple, and once we've done that, we can finally talk to this ugly guy. This right here is the Deku Tree, and can I get a quick side-by-side comparison of this guy and Shrek? I mean, tell me these two don't look the same. This version of the Deku Tree is highly considered to be the Deku Tree sprout that we saw in Ocarina of Time. I don't believe that's been officially confirmed, but I think it makes sense and would be pretty cool. The Deku Tree also introduces us to the Koroks, which are these little forest spirits that are descendants of Ocarina of Time's Kokiris. I've only played through Wind Waker recently, so I was really shocked to see how consistent the design of the Koroks is. The Koroks in Wind Waker look nearly identical to those of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, which really shocked me. According to the Deku Tree, the Koroks hold a special ceremony once every year, and in even better news, we'll be gifted with the next pearl we need, but something's stopping them from completing the ceremony. Apparently, one of the Koroks named Makara has fallen into the Forbidden Woods, which seems to be a huge issue. Since Link's everyone's favorite little errand boy, we're of course gonna have to go save him. But as one of the very wise Koroks state, humans can't fly, which we'll need to be able to do in order to even enter the Forbidden Woods. Luckily, the Deku Tree's got just the item we need, however, because his magic power is diminished or something, we have to climb up to get it ourselves. Using these Baba Buds, we can launch ourselves into the air where we have to land right back into another bud, and so on and so forth. Just like that stupid auction, I kinda struggled with this too. Yes, I know, haha, I suck at video games. Anyways, once we finally climb to the top, we'll get an awesome item being the Deku Leaf. With the Deku Leaf, we can glide around places, allowing us to start our trek to the Forbidden Woods. I know I just said we're gonna start heading to the Forbidden Woods, but I lied. I'm sorry, please just let me make it up to you by talking about some awesome side content. The second we leave the Forest Haven, we can spot a little island directly across from us. If we go over there, some nerdy looking fellow will ask us to hit a switch that will open up this vault looking area. If you've got a pair that can be bought from Beetle, you can just take control of a seagull and smack his head on the switch to open up the entrance to the Nintendo Gallery. This place is pretty neat, as you can give this guy pictures of cool people and he'll turn them into sculptures. It'll take a day before they're ready, but man do I love looking around this place. While there's a few parts of Wind Waker I don't enjoy, it's the little things like these that make me appreciate the game. Okay, now it's actually time to head to the Forbidden Woods. If we continue to take the normal path, we'll see that we can use the Deku Leaf to glide on over to a separate platform. We can actually use the Wind's Requiem to our advantage and get over to the other platform easier. On this platform, there's an updraft that we can take to get on over to the Forbidden Woods entrance, but one slight issue. I'm really bad at this game. These stupid hats at the entrance were giving me the business, and I for the life of me could not get past them. You know, I'm starting to think the reason I don't like this game as much as other Zeldas is because I suck at it. Nonetheless, once you make it past them, you'll be able to enter the Forbidden Woods. As always with these videos, let's start by taking a look at the dungeon theme. I've already said that I'm not a big fan of this place, but my goodness, this might be one of my favorite temple themes of all time. There's so many different elements here, from percussion to low reed instruments, flutes, and a constant wind in the background. As some of you probably know, I'm a sucker for a good atmospheric theme, and the Forbidden Woods theme really immerses you in the area. That is another huge positive with Wind Waker. The music in this game is phenomenal and might be the best in the Zelda series. The very first room has a whole lot of green choo-choos trying to inconvenience you at every turn. On the left side of the room, there's a Jikbean sized Boko Nut that we can then throw at this vine parasite thing on the door to unlock it. Before we go through it though, there's a chest on the right side of the room containing our patented dungeon map. Through the door, we come across a pretty fun room where we can combine Boko Bulbs with the Deku Leaf to glide across the room. There's also vines we have to dodge while gliding, but unlike those stupid pea hats, they aren't too difficult to avoid. Once we make it to the other side of the room, there's another one of these vine parasites blocking the door, but luckily we can use some bomb flowers located nearby to blow that sucker up. The next area shows off another feature of the Deku Leaf, which allows you to shoot wind at objects. In this particular room, we can throw some wind at these little turbines which make this platform move. In the next room, we have these stupid motherfuckers who are stupid as shit and need to burn in the fiery pits of hell. Whew. Sorry I went a little over the top there. My bad. Anyway, there's some pea hats in here that can be defeated easily with our glorious Deku Leaf. There's also a lot more Boko Babas to take out too, and one of them is nice enough to let us use its bulb to climb higher. At the top of the room, there's yet another parasite vine blocking the door. While there's nothing on this side we can use to break the lock, there is a Boko nut on the other side of the room we can get to using another platform controlled by turbines. Once we get the nut to the other side of the room, we can then head to the next room, but don't forget to get this chest containing a whopping 20 rupees. The next area introduces you to a very annoying mechanic in this dungeon, which are vines that pop out of the ground if you get near them. They're blocking another nut we'll need to continue onwards, but luckily we can just use the Deku Leaf to get it away from the vines. This next room is the closest thing we have to a central room in the dungeon. We can use our grappling hook to climb up to a couple of moving wooden platforms that I find pretty cute. Up here's a locked door we can't access yet, and a nut that we can take all the way to another vine locked door. There's also more wooden platforms we can climb that take us up to a pile of leaves that when blown away reveals a warp pod. I haven't talked too much about these yet, but they basically act as checkpoints you can travel back to throughout the dungeon. They're a welcome addition to the dungeon, but I honestly don't ever really use them. Through the once vine encased door, we enter a hallway with a ton of morphs. These guys will stick to you, and the only way to get them off is by performing a spin attack, which isn't easy in this tight hallway. Once they're all gone, you can open a chest with 10 whole rupees and continue onward through another door. This honestly might be my least favorite room, and I'm sure you can guess why. I found this room to be super annoying because what you have to do is blow up some wooden barricades with bombs. The first one's not so bad because there's nothing blocking your way, and behind it is a chest containing the compass. There's another barricade that we can take out, but it seems to be out of reach from the bombs. Unfortunately, there's a very specific path you have to take to get in front of the barricade due to the vines popping up out of the ground. Now, I wouldn't hate this room nearly as much if I had just realized that I could throw the bomb in front of the barricade from the other side of the vines a lot sooner. The entire reason why I don't like this room is because of how incompetent of a Zelda player I am. Anyways, once you blow up the wood and get to the other side, you can open up a chest containing a small key. Of course, there's only one locked door that we know of, so let's head on over to it. Also, when we head back through the hallway, there's more morphs and green choo-choo standing in our way. Once we unlock the door, we get to another room with another platform you'll need to move using the Deku Flower, and these stupid pea hats! Shiggy, I've had it up to here with these stupid enemies. What makes this room a bit different than others like this is that you actually have to hit the turbine on the far side before jumping onto the platform. The timing is not that bad, and once you reach the other side, we can enter a neat new area. There's tons of enemies in this room, ranging from Boko Babas to Mothulas, and of course, these guys. This room is actually pretty vertical, and we can take some Boko Bulbs all the way up to 2 doors, with one of the doors of course being blocked off by some vines. The other door is unlocked, and this leads to a mini-boss. The mini-boss for the Forbidden Woods is just a big Mothula, and it's honestly pretty fun. Spoiler alert, this fight is way better than the final boss of the dungeon. The Mothula poops out some morphs, and we'll do a little drive-by. It's still pretty easy, and once you chop off its wings, it's all she wrote for Mothula. With Mothula defeated, a room opens with a chest containing the dungeon item, the boomerang. I'm a big boomerang enjoyer, and it's super fun to use in this game. We need to use the boomerang to hit a couple of switches in order to exit the room. Using the boomerang, we can also get rid of the vine parasites on the door. The next area has a bunch of spiky nuts that we need to cut down with a boomerang in order to cross to the other side of the room. On the other side, there's a chest with a joy pendant and another door we can go through. This takes us back to the kinda central room where we can now cut down this weird tree flower looking thing. Once it's cut down, it crashes into a completely new area for us to explore. After going through the door, there's of course some morphs, and that's it. Nothing else down here. No enemies, no nothing. With a bit of platforming and some more enemy killing, we can go through a door to the next room. There's a floating flower that we can cut down, but first we need to get the chest on the other side containing a yellow rupee. After cutting down the flower, we can then use it to guide a bomb flower to a barrier blocking a door. Through the door, there's a bunch of enemies to pack out, and another Boko Baba who's nice enough to let us use his bulb. On the upper floor of the room, there's another platform that can be moved by shooting wind at turbines. This is my favorite one of these puzzles of the bunch because once again, you have to move the platform first, then glide on over to it to be able to move it to the other side. On the other side is a bomb flower that we can throw into a hole which allows us to get a chest. Inside of the chest is of course, a treasure chart! Woo, baby, my favorite! I'm sorry guys, I've been hating on this game too much. I'm exaggerating it. I do think this is a good game, but it's just not for me. Anyway, we can go back to the flower from earlier and move down this dirty sewer water stream using the Deku Leaf. There's some Octoroks along the way that I find very fun to kill with the flower boat. At the end of the stream, there's a bunch of green choo-choos and Dexavines to fight, which is always fun. There's also a door we can go through, but the way back through gets blocked off by some vines. In here, there's a bunch of pillars with switches on them that we need to hit with our boomerang all at once. Once that's done, a door opens to a chest containing the big key. Did I just make the same joke as I did for the Dragon Roost Cavern review? Yes, I did. Once we get the key though, a couple of scary moblins get dropped into the area, but we can take them out pretty quickly. Once they're out of the way, the door to escape opens up, however, we do have to do a little bit of climbing to get up there. Now we need to head all the way back to the semi-central room, but I got a bone to pick with you again, Wind Waker. So when you hit this turbine with wind, it causes an updraft to appear, but how the heck is that possible? I don't understand how all of a sudden this can just happen. Man, who am I kidding? There's talking boats and trees in this game. I don't think random wind shooting up is that far-fetched. Back in the central room, there's a door that we can open up with our boomerang that leads to a room with a couple of Mothulas to fight. Once they're defeated, a chest spawns in containing a joy pendant, and the next area unlocks. For the final room before the boss, there's just a bunch of spiky nuts to dodge. How engaging. Once we enter the boss room though, we can spot the Korok Makar, but then he gets eaten, oh no! This right here is the very underwhelming boss of the Forbidden Woods, Kale Demos. While the boss is underwhelming, Kale Demos' theme is another absolute banger. You know, the more I think about it, the more I really do think Wind Waker might have my favorite soundtrack out of any Zelda game. It's such a hype theme that contrasts with the mysterious vibe that the Forbidden Woods has. In order to beat Kale Demos, you have to use your boomerang to cut his little tentacles attached to the ceiling. Once you do that, you can then wail on him with your sword in his face. If you're not careful though, he might swallow you while you're attacking him, but it's not too big of a threat. Before you know it, the fight will be over and Makar will be saved. Yeah, this boss is just super underwhelming, which hurts the dungeon's grade. However, this boss does have one super neat feature. You can actually beat this boss in one hit, which is a super cool feature. In order to do so, you need to grab some forest water, which you can get from the forest haven, and pour it into the flowery center of the boss. The slight caveat with this is that the forest water will expire in 30 minutes, so you either have to run through the entire dungeon quickly or get the big key and then go get the water. Nonetheless though, it's still a pretty cool feature that at least makes this boss slightly more interesting. After getting our patented heart container, we get teleported back to the Forest Haven with Makar. The Deku Tree is pleased that Makar has returned in one piece, and now they can perform the ceremony. The Deku Tree also keeps his promise and grants us with Farore's Pearl. You also get to experience the Korok ceremony, and it's so freaking beautiful, man. Truly a masterpiece of a ceremony. The ceremony actually produces a bunch of seeds that the Koroks can use to go spread the forest to other parts of the sea, which is pretty neat. And that's the end of the Forbidden Woods. The dungeon as a whole is kind of a mixed bag for me. For starters, I really love that we get to use the Deku Leaf, and getting the boomerang is also great. The bosses, on the other hand, just feel a bit lackluster and short compared to many others in Zelda games. There's also quite a few points in the dungeon where I just feel like they're dragging things. There's also a bit of repetitiveness with the Deku Leaf puzzles here. I know that we still have the Wind Temple to cover, and trust me, that one will have a lot better wind puzzles, but it would have been nice to have a little variety. That being said though, I really love the atmosphere of the Forbidden Woods. The music everywhere is amazing, it does a great job at immersing you in the location. Unfortunately, I don't think I can give this dungeon higher than a C, and it's a lower C at that. I just don't find a lot of the actual dungeon super interesting. There are some positives to the Forbidden Woods, but I really just think the negatives vastly outweigh the positives. Not the worst dungeon I've ever played through, nor the worst in this game, but it's not one I'm going to look forward to playing through again. Since we've gotten 2 out of the 3 goddess pearls we've been tasked with finding, it's time to try and track down the third and final one. According to the King of Red Lions, the last pearl should be found in the hands of Jabun, so we need to head on over to the Great Fish Isle in order to find him. On the downside though, it's not looking like Jabun is going to be here because things are looking a bit grim. All seems lost in the search for Jabun until our old pal Quill shows up. Jabun was originally here, but he had to flee due to the attacks from a shadow at the Forsaken Fortress. Apparently, Jabun has fled to Outset Island in a cave that's sealed by a mighty stone slab. Our old pirate pals had tried to break into the cave, but were unsuccessful, and they were last spotted on Windfall Island. Of course, that means that Windfall Island is going to be our next stop. I really love how the entire trip to Windfall has a thunderstorm as a backdrop. Adventure! Yeah! It makes for such an epic journey. As we approach the island, we'll notice Tetra's ship, but we don't need to go there, and instead we need to head on over to this little shack on the edge of the island. We can't use the front door, but luckily for us, there's a crawl space on the roof that we can use instead. Inside of the house, we get a classic Wind Waker cutscene where our old pirate pals are stealing some bombs from the sky they tied up. They plan on taking these bombs back to Outset Island in order to blow up that cave entrance that was talked about earlier. As they plan to take the bombs back to their ship, the crew convinces Tetra to wait until tomorrow before they set sail so that they can have a fun night at Windfall. As they're discussing this though, Tetra spots Link before definitively deciding on staying here. We also apparently need a password to get into the ship, which we overhear as Swabbies, which is gonna come in handy. Once they're all gone, we can start heading on over to the pirate ship. After telling Nico the password, we can get inside the ship. Nico is actually nice enough to treat us to one of his little mini games, which are always fun, with a prize at the end. For this challenge, we have to jump between lanterns on a time limit, and while this may seem a bit challenging, it's not too bad. Once we successfully make it to the other side, we can open up a chest to get a staple Zelda item, being bombs. In Wind Waker though, you can also use bombs as cannonballs on our ship, which is of course super fun. Well, now with the bombs acquired, we can start making our way on over to Outset Island. We actually have to go behind the island in order to find the cave entrance, and after a bunch of bombs we get to enter the cave. Inside is of course Jabul, but I have a question. How the heck did this dude even get into the cave? Jabul is one big fish and that entrance was pretty small. The King of Red Lions and Jabul have a little conversation where our ship spends a decent bit just glazing Link. Jabul is then gracious enough to grant us with Nehru's Pearl, which is the third and final one we need. We also learn that apparently this thunderstorm was caused by Ganon as a curse he set upon us. On the bright side, at least we don't have to go inside Jabul's belly, or else I might have quit playing the game. Now with all 3 Goddess Pearls obtained, we have to go place them in some specific spots. We'll have to go to 3 different islands dubbed the Triangle Islands. The actual islands themselves don't really have much on them besides a statue that we'll need to place the pearl in. Once all of the pearls have been placed in the statues, they all explode into much prettier looking statues representing the goddesses. They shoot beams at each other and form a triforce in the water, causing a massive dungeon known as the Tower of the Gods to erect out of the water. The Tower of the Gods was placed by the gods of the ancient world so that they may test the courage of men. If we complete the trial, then we'll be recognized as a true hero and will be granted with the power to destroy great evil. With that, we can sail on over to and inside the Tower of the Gods. As always, let's start by talking about the dungeon theme. It's a really great theme that fits perfectly with the location. It feels so grand with high-pitched instruments and a low baritone voice. It really does feel like you're in some sacred temple made by beings up above. One thing that makes the Tower of the Gods super unique is that for the first little bit of the temple, you actually have to deal with the constant changing of water levels. I didn't expect to ever have the King of Red Lions join us for a dungeon, and it's really cool to see him here. We can start things off on the right side of the room where there's some statues we can move around. If we place one on this switch, a door opens to the next area. In here, there's a whopping 1 yellow choo-choo and a gap denying us access to the other side of the room. In the gap area though, there's some boxes and another switch that this time makes a cool looking rainbow bridge appear. However, there's still some rising water in this room, so you'll have to cross the bridge quickly or else it'll disappear. On the other side is a different looking statue that we can take back to the previous room. There's a little area that it fits perfectly in, and when placed lowers a gate to a new area. While we could travel over there, there is one little side room to explore first. When the water is lowered, we can enter through this door. In here, there's a bunch of yellow choo-choos who have an electric ability. The water also rises and lowers in this room, and there's a bunch of tiny areas we can reach using our bombs. There's not a whole lot in these little rooms, however behind one of them is a chest containing the dungeon map. Now we can head through the area we unlocked earlier. There's a door that's locked, but after moving 2 statues onto 2 separate switches, we can enter the room. This is one of my favorites in the dungeon. Of course, this room has rising water levels, but also a bunch of boxes you can move around. What you have to do is move all these boxes into the right places so that you can platform across them. You also can't really cheese this because you'll need to light one of these sticks on fire and transport it to the unlit torches. Once the torches are lit up, a chest appears containing a small key. I have to admit, I was a little confused on where to go after this. It didn't look like there were many places to go, but on the left side of the main room, there's actually some walls we can bomb, revealing a new area. There's 2 separate doors that we can go through, but let's start with a little puzzle. On the bottom floor, there's 2 unlit torches that we'll of course need to light. What can make this challenging though is that you have to look out for the rising water. Once the torches are lit, a chest spawns in containing a joy pendant. Well, let's move on to the top floor where we're greeted with a red bubble. There's also a chest in here containing the compass. Now I'm sure you noticed this giant eye in the room, but we can't do anything with that right now. Now we can go explore the room on the bottom floor. There's a statue that seems unreachable with the current state of the room, however, if we defeat all the yellow choo-choos in the room, a rainbow staircase appears, allowing us to take the statue. We can take it all the way to the top floor of this area, where when placed in the correct spot, unlocks a new area. Unfortunately, we can't take the King of Red Lions with us, so we have to leave him behind. In this next room, there's a really annoying Beamos and a couple of rats. There's 3 different switches on the other side of the room that don't seem to do anything. If we bring 2 statues over and stand on one of the switches ourselves, that makes a bunch of platforms move, taking us up to a door. This next area is another very important room that we'll keep coming back to throughout the dungeon. There's a few separate doors in here, but we can only go through the one on the right at the moment. This is a pretty simple room with a moving platform and some yellow choo-choos. Through the next door, we come across yet another statue, but this one actually moves on its own. After you take him through most of the room, you'll have to pick him up and jump with him to continue backtracking. Yeah, I don't want to talk about this room. I may or may not have had a big stupid brain moment and couldn't figure out how to get him over here. Taking him through the next room isn't too challenging, and once we come back to this central room, the statue takes on a life of its own again and stays on a platform which spawns in some sort of stone with markings on it. This here teaches us a new song, being the command melody, which allows us to control these statues. This also unlocks the door to the next area where there's some red bubbles and something for us to use our grappling hook on. Using the grappling hook, we can reach a new area and there's yet another statue. There's seemingly no way to get the statue back to the central room, but using the button and the command melody, we can spawn in a rainbow bridge and make the statue cross it. In this room, there's yet another switch that opens up a new door. We'll then have to use our grappling hook to cross on over to it and enter a mini boss room. This This right here is a Dark Nut, and it's pretty fun to fight. The music here is also banging, making this mini-boss feel like such an epic fight. You'll have to press A at the proper time in order to slowly chip off his armor. I heavily enjoy fighting Dark Nuts in this game, and this very first one we fight feels like a decent threat. Nonetheless though, once we take him down, a chest spawns in containing the item of this dungeon, the hero's bow. The bow is of course a staple item in Zelda, so it's nice to finally have it. Once we leave that room, there's an eye that we can shoot with our bow, causing some platforms to move around the room. We can then of course take the statue back to the central room, where the statue allows us to access a new room. The next area has got a bunch of keys flying around and 2 platforms that act like a scale. There's also a wall we can bomb that will of course take us to a new area. In here there's even more statues, but at least these statues are pretty big. If you play the Wind's Requiem, a chest spawns in and the statues try to attack you. These guys are Armos Knights, and in order to defeat them you have to throw bombs in their mouth whenever it's open. It's simple but pretty fun. Once they're out of the way, you can get the chest and be granted with a treasure chart. Down here on the lower level, there's also another room we can explore where there's a bunch of moving platforms. On some of the platforms, there's eye switches that you can shoot to make those platforms move. Doing this, we can find a chest with a small key, however, that's not everything in here. After hitting another random eye switch, it'll spawn in a chest containing a joy pendant. Now comes the worst part of this room, being trying to get out of it. It's super tedious if you're dumb like me and don't use the Deku Leaf, but luckily if you just jump into the endless abyss, you'll spawn back at the entrance to the room. In the previous room with the scale-like platforms, we can throw some of these statues on one of them so that we can get to the other side. The next room has another moving statue, but it's blocked off by an electrical gate. Luckily, there's a box that we can use to get enough height to glide over the electrical gate, and we can call upon the statue. Man, it would have been nice if in that last room someone remembered to use the Deku Leaf. In order to get out though, we have to use the command melody and put the statue on the switch to turn off the electrical gate. As we take him back, the previous room has a Wizrobe in it this time, which can be easily taken out with our bow. We'll also have to once again throw a bunch of other statues on the scale to get our trusty statue to the other side. Once all the statues are in the central room, they make a little teleporter appear, but first there's a couple more things to do. You remember that room with the eye in it in the first area? Well, actually, you probably don't because everyone's attention spans are getting ruined by short form content, but I digress. If we hit this eye, the walls begin to open, revealing a chest that contains a treasure chart. Well, now we can take this little teleporter that of course takes us to a new room. There's a couple of BMOs in here and some switches that of course need some statues. Once all the switches are pressed down, the electrical gate opens, leading us to a chest containing the big key. Aren't you guys so proud of me for not making the same joke I did for the last 2 times I opened this chest? Anyways, the statues immediately start attacking us as they're Armos. I don't really know why these specific statues decided to start attacking us at this exact moment, but hey, what are you gonna do? In order to defeat them, you have to hit them in the back, which is made easy by stunning them with your arrows. Once they're defeated, a door opens, taking us outside the dungeon. We need to take a staircase up, but there's a bunch of BMOs on the edge that try to stop that. Also, a Kargarak just kinda pulls up out of nowhere. You can shoot the BMOs with your bow and arrow, making them pretty ineffective. Just don't pay attention to how many hearts I've lost. Eventually, we'll reach the top of the staircase and enter the boss room. In this very ominous looking room, we hear a voice congratulating us on making it this far and asking us to accept one final challenge. Out of the walls pop 2 hands and a head as the boss of the Tower of the Gods, Godon the Great Arbiter, appears. This guy joins the IROC boss, Bongo Bongo, and a plethora of other Nintendo bosses where he's just a floating head and disembodied hands. Actually, Jickbean, Bongo Bongo doesn't have a head, it's actually his neck. Shut up! Thank you. Just like previous bosses, this guy's theme is pretty great. It feels like the final test of a huge gauntlet. You'll have to then use your bow and arrow to shoot at his hands and his eyes. If you're scared about running out of arrows, don't worry because Godon is nice enough to give you some arrows. After both of his eyes are shot out, his mouth will open, which you can then throw a bomb in and deal damage. His moveset quite obviously revolves a lot around just punching and smashing with his hands, but he'll also do this frame-chunking attack where he just shoots fireballs out of his mouth. Seriously, what is it with the bosses in this game and just making the frame rate chunk like crazy? This especially shouldn't be a problem on the Wii U, but it's not really game breaking. After throwing a few bombs into Godon's mouth, he says that the pathway can now be opened and that we should be careful along the way. He's also nice enough to grant us with our patented heart container as we take a teleporter to a new area. There's a ladder in front of us, so of course we gotta climb it. We'll then notice a bell that we can use our grappling hook on in order to ring it. Doing so makes a new golden teleporter appear in the water. We're told by the King of Red Lions that this was only the beginning of our trial as we descend into the water. This next little bit won't really count towards the temple's grade, but we're gonna talk about it anyway. We descend all the way down to Hyrule Castle, but Link doesn't know that yet. We're then told that there's gonna be something absolutely awesome inside the castle, which I'm inclined to believe. Once we walk into the castle, everything seems to be frozen in place, and there's even a statue of some hero. Wonder who that is. We'll come across a little puzzle where we have to move these triangles into the right spots to form a Triforce. I really like this puzzle, but man does it boggle my mind. Once all 3 triangle pieces are in place, the statue of the hero suddenly moves, revealing a staircase. After taking the staircase, we can see the Master Sword, and of course you get a super cool cutscene when you pull it. I really like this version of the Master Sword, and I think it's so cool. When the Master Sword is pulled though, everything that was frozen in place starts to move, and the exit to the castle becomes blocked off. Also, look at Link's stupid face when he's holding the Master Sword. Why does he look like this? When we leave that room, we'll have to take out all the enemies in the main room. There's tons of dark nuts and moblins scattered throughout the place. It can actually be pretty tough because these guys just love to jump Link. Okay, but honestly, there might be too many enemies in here. I get that you want to show off your brand new Master Sword, but my goodness, do you fight these fellas for a while. Once they're all defeated though, we're finally able to exit Hyrule Castle. With the Master Sword acquired, we're now able to leave this place and finally go save our sister. And that's the end of the Tower of the Gods. This is by far my favorite dungeon so far, and from my research, most people seem to agree. Compared to the previous dungeons, this is a huge step above them with so many cool puzzles, fun bosses, and a unique atmosphere. Being able to just roam around a dungeon on a boat is super fun, and while the second half of the dungeon is pretty much just a huge escort mission, I found it pretty fun. Being able to finally use the hero's bow is great, and I like how it's used here. There are a couple of times in the dungeon where I really had to think, which I'm sure is not the case for most of you. Yes, I know I'm super dumb for not knowing that I could jump this gap while holding the statue. My bad. All in all, I think I'm gonna give this dungeon a grade of A. It's very unique, the bosses are super fun, and the whole concept of the dungeon is great. We'll see some other good dungeons later, but this is easily one of the best we've come across so far. Hey look, we're already coming back to the Forsaken Fortress. I bet everyone's excited. Well, there's no way this can be worse than the first time, so let's go ahead and get this over with. As we approach the place, we get bombarded by cannons, but we can just fire bombs right back at them to destroy them. We can then blow up the door and enter back into the Forsaken Fortress. As we start walking around, we come across a door, but out of nowhere, Phantom Ganon spawns in as we initiate a boss fight. Okay, it's technically a mini boss, but it feels like a boss fight. The music here especially makes it feel a lot cooler. It makes the whole fight feel tense, with it being super fast paced. I also really like that you fight him pretty similarly to Ganon in Ocarina of Time as you play some tennis with him. After a little bit of tennis, which gets very fast paced very quickly, Phantom Ganon will be hit by the blue ball and you can wail on him with your sword. Of course, after doing that for a little bit, Phantom Ganon will run away, some doors unlock, and a chest spawns in containing the item of the Forsaken Fortress, the Skull Hammer. Hammers are absolutely awesome and this thing is pretty powerful. You even get to test out your new hammer on some mini blends that decide to inconvenience you. As we explore the Forsaken Fortress for a second time, we don't have to stealth anymore, which is amazing, and there's even some new enemies like statues that shoot laser beams out of their eyes. While the Skull Hammer is a pretty awesome weapon to use, it has another use. There's these wooden pillars that block certain pathways, and we can use the Skull Hammer to get them out of our way. Also, in one of these random rooms, there's a chest containing the compass. Can you tell what room this is? Because I certainly can't. Once again, we'll have to take out the bokoblins operating searchlights, and it's not hard at all. Once they're out of the way, we can once again climb all the way up to the room hiding the pointy-eared girls while taking out all sorts of enemies. Once we make it up here, Link's a lot more cautious as he enters the room. This time around, we're actually able to save our sister thanks to Tetra and the pirates showing up. They were nice enough to lure that big bird away from us, and Tetra also notices the sword that we now have. She's absolutely baffled at this, but decides not to worry about it right now and saves the girls. It's a super happy moment seeing Link and Aero reunited once again, but we won't stay reunited for too long as we have to go and take out Ganondorf. While everyone leaves to be safe, the room we're in starts to flood for some reason, and the big bird descends into the room. Luckily for us though, this room has a spiral staircase, and on it there's a ton of bokoblins that try to make your life hard, but you can completely avoid them. Once we reach the top, the bird blocks our path, but if we hit him with the Skull Hammer, he'll fall into the water below. Spoiler alert, that bird isn't dead, and once we reach the top, he comes back from the water as the Helmarok King boss fight begins. I really like this boss fight. The music, as always, is phenomenal and is so epic sounding. The Helmarok King will fly around, and when he's landed, he'll try to attack you with his head. If he misses, his head will just get stuck into the ground, allowing you to hit him with the Skull Hammer. That's the basic gist of this fight, and I find it super fun. After a couple Skull Hammer hits, you'll knock off his mask, which doesn't really add anything new to the fight, unfortunately. It does mean, though, that the Helmarok King is almost dead, and after one more Skull Hammer smash, he'll be defeated. This, of course, grants us with our patented heart container and opens up the pathway to Ganondorf. As you enter Ganon's quarters, you'll see the fatty looking out the window. He introduces himself to Link as these two titans of the industry have a face-off. According to Ganondorf, pulling the sword destroyed the seal that has kept Ganondorf here. Link then tries to rush Ganon, but he just tanks it like the absolute beast he is. Then he smacks the heck out of Link and just aura farms on his body. He also says that this blade is completely useless to us since it doesn't sparkle or something like that. Ganon's getting ready to kill Link, but then Tetra shows up to save the day. But Ganon don't take too kindly to getting beat up by children and starts choking her when all of a sudden he notices his Triforce of Power resonating with her. He claims that she's Princess Zelda, but Tetra has absolutely no idea what he's talking about. Before he can do anything about it though, some Rito and Valoo come over to save us from Ganon's grasp, as Valoo just lights the broken down ship Ganondorf is on fire, which is absolutely awesome. We then get brought back to the King of Red Lions at the Tower of the Gods, where we must return to Hyrule. Once we're down here, Tetra finally wakes up and we get the absolute funniest image of Link ever. Just look at how stretched out this dude is. No, this is not edited in any way, and this is exactly how he looks in the game. We get told that we must head back to the room where we pulled the Master Sword by someone talking out of the stone. fun. I like that we get to bring Tetra with us. Having companions in Zelda is always nice, even if it is for a short little while. Once we get down to the Master Sword room, some dude is standing at the pedestal. It turns out that this dude is the King of Hyrule, which is where we are right now. It also turns out that the king is actually the King of Red Lions. He tells us the story of how Ganon came to power and how the kingdom of Hyrule and Ganon were both sealed away. The people who sealed everything away were our ancestors, and as long as Ganon wasn't revived, Hyrule would stay sunken underwater. The king then asks Tetra to come to him as he reveals that she's in possession of the Triforce of Wisdom. It was passed down to Tetra by her mother, and that means she has the power of the gods. As we get a neat Link to the Past musical callback, Tetra turns into the one and only Princess Zelda. Tetra is the one true heir to the royal family and the last of its bloodline. Zelda's lullaby then kicks in, which is just one of the greatest pieces of music in the entire series. Ganon will not rest until he finds us, and it's our goal to repair the Master Sword so that we can defeat Ganondorf. Zelda will stay down here though, just so she can be protected as we leave with the king to go do awesome hero stuff. And that's a wrap on the second time at the Forsaken Fortress. This was definitely a much better experience with some super fun boss fights. The actual dungeon itself though does still kinda suck, but I mean the bosses are what the second time is even needed for. Phantom Ganon is a neat boss that I wish was a little bit longer, but I understand because it's not the main boss of the dungeon. The Helmrock King is super fun, and being able to use the Skull Hammer is also super fun. Overall, I think the second visit to the Forsaken Fortress deserves a C. As for the Forsaken Fortress as a whole though, it's getting a grade at D. The first time around really sucks, but the fact that the second visit has a couple of fun boss fights makes it a bit better. Still though, the Forsaken Fortress is easily one of the weakest dungeons, not only in the Wind Waker, but in all of Zelda. While Princess Zelda waits down below the sea in Hyrule Castle, it's Link's job to go awaken a couple of sages. In order to do that though, we're going to need quite a few items. The first thing we'll need to get is the Ballad of the Gales song. This acts as the warp song for this game, and it can be obtained anytime after getting the Hero's Bow. If you remember all the way back to when I talked about Dragon Roost Cavern, we met Zephos and talked about his brother Cyclos, which is who we need to go and find. Cyclos can be found in a bunch of different places all over the map in a big cyclone. You'll have to shoot him with your bow 3 times, and since he respects Link's aim so much, he decides to teach him a song. The song in question is the Ballad of the Gales, which allows us to fast travel to different sections of the map. With that song learned, we can now get the fire and ice arrows by using the Ballad of the Gales to travel to the Mother and Child Isles. When we do fast travel, we get placed in a little fairy fountain as the Queen of all Fairies herself appears. Since she likes Link, and let's be honest, who doesn't, she grants us with a couple of new items being fire and ice arrows for our bow. Of course, with ice arrows we can freeze even the hottest of flames, and with fire arrows we can melt the coldest ice. The Fairy Queen also kinda hits on Link a little, which is a little weird considering Link's a child, but whatever. Now with the fire and ice arrows, we can go get a couple of things. For the Earth Temple though, we'll only need to get the Power Bracelet, which can be found at the Fire Mountain. Fun fact, I had to learn how to read the Wind Waker map because I hadn't been doing a key feature of this game. Around the vast ocean, there's a race of fish called fishmen who mark islands and such on your map. If you were to do this for all the quadrants on the map, you'd be able to learn all about what's on the islands. In quadrant F3 though is the Fire Mountain, which is like a mini volcano. We can use our ice arrows on the lava, which stops it spewing out for 5 minutes. In those 5 minutes, we're gonna have to go into the little volcano and find the Power Bracelet. After platforming across lava, we'll eventually come across 2 Magtails that we need to defeat. You can make short work of them with the ice arrows and a couple of sword combos. Once they're defeated, a chest spawns in containing the Power Bracelets. Of course, these things allow us to pick up things that are a million times heavier than Link, such as these Stone Watcher rocks. Now with the Power Bracelets, we can head on over to the Headstone Island so that we can learn another song. Headstone Island, believe it or not, has a headstone that we need to move, which opens up a cave entrance. In here, there's a song inscribed on a stone which we can learn when we pull out the Wind Waker. With that, we learn the Earth God's lyric, and then out of nowhere, a Zora ghost named Larudo shows up. Larudo is a Zora sage from an old age who wants to help us out. She tells us that we need to find someone in her bloodline who carries a similar instrument to hers and then bring them back here. Before we do that though, there's one last little thing I did during this time. If you head on down towards the Two-Eye Reef, which is southwest of the Great Fish Isles, a big Octorok pops out of the ocean for you to fight. If you hit all of his eyes using the bow and arrow, boomerang, or the cannon on your ship, you'll be able to defeat him. After he's dead, a fairy pops out of the water and doubles your magic bar. Now with that out of the way, we can go and try and find Larudo's descendant. It's actually a lot easier than you might think, as we just need to head on over to Dragon Roost Island. After climbing for a decent bit, we'll eventually find a certain Rito with the instrument similar to Larudo's. Up here is Medli, who's just strumming away on her harp. When we walk up to her, she's super excited to see us and gives us all the updates on how things are going with Prince Kamali. If we take out our Wind Waker though, Medli asks us to conduct for her, and if we play the Earth God's lyric, some cool stuff happens. Medli all of a sudden passes out, and we enter a mine to see an interaction between her and Larudo. They play a little duet together, which summons a Triforce and the Master Sword Sword before Medli then wakes up. Medli understands her assignment and asks Link to take her to the Earth Temple so that we can restore the Master Sword's power. The entrance to the Earth Temple just so happens to be where we learn the Earth God's lyrics, so on over there we go. Before we go into the cave, the King of Red Lions gives us some tips on how to control Medli inside of the temple, which is very kind of him. When we get inside the cave, we can play the Earth God's lyric, which will then cause Medli to join in and play along. Once she does that, the stone with the song on it explodes, and the pathway to the Earth Temple opens. You guys know the drill by now, it's time to talk about the Earth Temple's music. Oh my goodness, is this thing a banger. It has that classic mysterious feel that almost every single dungeon theme tends to have, but also just slaps. The percussion especially makes the track, and the wind instrument at the beginning gives me the creeps. Seriously, I'm surprised I haven't heard this song before playing through this game. If for some reason you haven't heard this before, then definitely give it a listen. Throughout the entirety of the dungeon, we get to interact with Medli in many ways, but for now, all we get to do is pick her up and use her to fly around. We get a little showcase of that in the first room as we fly across a gap to get to the next room. In the next area, there's a bunch of moblins that we can fight, and once they're gone, we get to do our very first puzzle. If we climb to the top of these stairs, we can then pick up Medli and fly over to 2 platforms with switches on them. You'll have to hold both of these switches down in order to move forwards, but luckily there's a solution to get Medli to the other pillar. Using the command melody, we actually get to control Medli, which is super cool. You can fly almost anywhere with her, but for our sake, she's gonna go to this platform with the other switch. With both switches activated, we can head on over to the next area. The door locks behind us as a bunch of choo-choos spawn in that we need to take out. There's some dark choo-choos though that can't be defeated by normal standards. Instead, we have to lure them into the light where they turn into stone, allowing us to take them down. Well, we could head on over to the next room. Using Medli and the light shining in this room, we can shine the light at a chest which contains the dungeon map. The next area is a place we'll come back to later once we get the dungeon item. For now though, we can use Medli's light reflecting capabilities to get rid of some of this fog, revealing a switch we can hit with the skull hammer to unlock a door. The next area has some open coffins with some red bubbles inside. There's also a ladder that leads us to a block we can move that lets in some sunlight. Using Medli once again, we can shine the light onto a chest which allows us to get it and grants us with a small key. As we try to leave though, some floor masters show up and take Medli away from us. Once you take out the floor masters, you can find Medli in the previous room in a cage that she can definitely get herself out of. Still though, she needs our help with the command melody, and we can use the small key we got to unlock the other door in this room. In here, there's of course a bunch of choo-choos once again, varying in type, including the dark choo-choos. We can burn these things covering the windows to let in some light so that we can turn the dark choo-choos to stone. With them turned to stone, we can then place the Medusified choo-choos on 2 switches that open up a door to the other side of the room. There's also a block we can push down in order to make backtracking through easier. The next room's got a floor master that we'll need to deal with before anything else. When he's sent back to the underworld, we can then push a block which lets in some sunlight. Using Medli once again, there's some symbols on the wall that when hit with light melt away, revealing both a block that we can move and a warp pot. There's also another movable block, however there's something on top of it that prevents us from moving it. Luckily though, we can melt it away with the sunlight, and once that block is moved into place, a chest spawns in containing the compass. We can then move that other block into place, which unlocks the door to the next area and allows us to get to that door. The next room has a few moblins that you'll need to take out alongside some Poes, but they can't get attacked unless they're hit with some light from Medli. I love how dumb the Poes look in this game. Usually they're some of the scarier looking enemies, but they just look dumb and funny here. Once they're all taken out, a staircase opens that leads to 2 doors, and we'll take the one on the left first. This room's got a bunch of coffins filled with Redeads. Now obviously Redeads are some of the most terrifying enemies in any Zelda game, and while you'd assume they wouldn't be too creepy in Wind Waker, you'd be wrong. I mean, just listen to this blood-curdling scream. Pretty spooky, I tell you what. In one of the coffins is a small key, and once all the Redeads are taken out, a ladder drops allowing us to leave. Through the other door that we use our small key on, we come across a mini-boss. In here, there's a bunch of Stalfos to fight. They each have a pretty fun moveset to dodge around, and in order to defeat them fully, you'll need to hit their head a few times. This is easily the best mini-boss so far, and it can be tough if you're dumb like me. Once they're all defeated, a staircase leads us to a chest containing the item of the dungeon, the mirror shield. Of course, this will be used in several light puzzles, and in this room specifically, we have to reflect some light onto a sun switch to get out of this place. All the moblins and Poes are back in the previous room, and while you don't need to take them out, you still can, but this time you can use your mirror shield to take out the Poes. With the mirror shield, we now need to head all the way back to that one room with the fog. There's 2 spotlights that we need to use in order to reflect light at these 2 sun switches on a statue. Once that's done, the room lights up and a staircase going downwards opens up. As we go down and cross a bridge, there will be a stone that looks like the one where we first learned the Earth God's lyric. If we play that song, the stone cracks, opening up access to a door. The next area has a spotlight, some Redeads, and a couple of mirrors that reflect light when shown on it. Reflecting light off both of these mirrors disintegrates 2 statues, opening up 2 separate rooms. Let's start with the room on the left where there's a bunch of fog and some floor masters. This fog actually makes you unable to use your sword, but luckily you can use the Deku Leaf to temporarily get rid of the fog. On the other side of the room is a little pillar that we can hit with the skull hammer that brings some light into the room. There also so happens to be a mirror in here that we can pull into the light, which will be useful later. Through the other door in the last room, we go down a little staircase and come across a fog-filled room. Also again, there's a bunch of floor masters, but if we get to the other side of the room unscathed, we can open a chest containing a small key. With that small key, we can open up a door in the previous room, but first we need to melt the statue holding a block in place that we can use to get up to the locked door. Through that door, there's some red bubbles imposed to fight alongside a whole bunch of statues that we can get rid of with the light from the mirror we moved earlier. We can't really reach many of these statues from just here, so we'll have to reflect the light off of Medli and then use the mirror shield off of that light to disintegrate the statue. We can't really reach many of these statues from just here, so we'll have to reflect the light off Medli and then use the mirror shield off of that light to disintegrate the statues. While there's a lot of statues in here, I just got rid of the one we needed to continue onwards because the mechanic feels a little clunky to me. The next area has got a whole lot of coffins filled with all sorts of things and a bunch of keys flying around. On the right side of the room is yet another Earth God's Lyric Stone, and on the left side is a chest containing a whopping 20 rupees. Of course, just like before, when we play the Earth God's Lyric at the stone, a new pathway opens. After taking a neat little staircase, we come across a pretty vertical room. While the boss door, or I guess the big door in this case, is easily accessible, we don't quite have the key for it yet. If we keep taking the staircase down though, we'll come across a door leading to what is easily my favorite room of the temple. This room acts as one big light puzzle with a bunch of mirrors needing to be maneuvered around in order to get light to a certain place. As I'm sure you're probably aware by now, I'm a huge fan of light puzzles in Zelda games, and this room might be the light puzzle's magnum opus of the series. Crazy enough though, it's super simple. As we do this, there's also a couple of chests that contain a purple ruby and a joy pendant. I'm not going to explain the entire puzzle because that would probably take up a whole page of my script, which, this video probably needs, but that would get way too boring. Once you get all the mirrors in the right places, you'll need to use both Medli and Link to reflect light into 2 sun switches which open up 2 new areas. There's one room that's tucked away in a corner that has 3 different coffins with 3 different Stalfos inside. Of course, you'll have to take them out, and once that's done, a chest spawns in containing a treasure chart. In the other area that opened up, we get to fight not only a dark nut, but a couple of blue bubbles that curse you. I suggest taking them out first because they can make fighting the dark nut a lot more challenging than it needs to be. When every enemy is taken out, a jail cell opens up with a chest containing the big key. Of course, with the big key in hand, we can backtrack all the way to the big door and enter the boss room. Medli decides to stay back for this one, which was probably a smart idea. Inside, the first thing we see is a whole bunch of Poes of varying colors frolicking around. When they spot Link, they all combine into one big Poe named Jalhala. Of course, we have to start with the boss theme, and once again, it's a certified banger. It's so goofy, starting off pretty quiet, but eventually building so much that everything comes to a complete stop. Then the real theme begins, almost sounding circus-like in a way. It's super fast-paced and fits with what we're fighting, which is this big, fat, goofy-looking Poe. The actual fight itself isn't my absolute favorite, but I still find it fun. You have to use your mirror shield to reflect some light into Jalhala, which then allows you to pick him up and throw him into the spikes on the wall. When you do that, he splits back into the many colorful Poes that we saw before. You'll then have to of course take out these Poes, but you won't be able to get all of them at first as Jalhala will reform. For me, this fight just goes on a bit too long. I know I've normally had a problem with the fights not going long enough, but I really think this one could have had some time cut from it. Jalhala also doesn't really have the greatest moveset, which mostly just revolves around shooting fire at you. As the fight goes on, less and less spotlights will appear, making it a bit harder to split Jalhala. It's by no means a bad fight, just one that overstays its welcome. Of course though, after defeating Jalhala, we get our patented heart container and the middle of the Triforce on the ground begins to glow. Medli then shortly joins us and Link puts the Master Sword in the glowing area. The two then play the Earth God's Lyric, and even Laruto is nice enough to join us. When the song is complete, the Master Sword regains some of its previous power and Link makes this stupid face again. Of course though, not all the power is gained yet, as we have to head on over to the Wind Temple to regain even more of the sword's power. Medli opts to stay here and pray as we're teleported back to the open seas. And that's a wrap on the Earth Temple. It's possible that my love of light puzzles stems from the Great Stone Tower Temple, but the fact that this place has those light puzzles really boosts its grade. I also just think there's a ton of creative puzzles here. Both the mini-boss and the actual boss of the temple are also pretty solid, which is something you rarely see in Zelda dungeons. It's also a joy having Medli around. You don't ever really have a separate companion going through a dungeon with you, and Medli's mechanics are pretty fun. Flying around with her is fun, and while it is a bit clunky transferring light between Link and Medli, it's still a cool idea. There's also a lot of cool enemy variety here, with of course classic Moblins, the new Dark Choo-Choos, and of course the creepy Stalfos and Redeads. I spent a while thinking on what grade I should give this temple, and I decided to give it a high A tier. This is easily one of the best temples I've ever had the pleasure of going through, and if that fight against Jalhala was just a little bit shorter, it could have had a case for making S tier. Still though, it's absolutely amazing and is one of the best parts of the Wind Waker. Just like the Earth Temple, we need to go and get a few items before going to the Wind Temple. The first thing that we'll need to get are the iron boots. Coincidentally, the last time we got this item, it also led to one of the most controversial Zelda dungeons. Looks like the Wind Temple's off to a great start then. In order to get the iron boots though, we have to head on over to the Ice Ring Isles, which is one quadrant next to the Forest Haven. Unlike the Fire Mountain where we had to use ice arrows to cool off a mini volcano, this time we have to use the fire arrows to stop this freezing blizzard. Once it's gone, we can platform across a couple of slippery ice platforms to get inside a cave. The cave has a couple of keys that you'll benefit from taking out first and some icy platforms. After taking a little slide and definitely not falling off a few times, we can come across a chest containing the iron boots. Now with the iron boots, it's of course time to go learn a song. In order to do so, we need to head on over to the Gale Isles, where there's a rock that's blowing out some super strong winds. Luckily, we can use the iron boots to tread up to the rock and smash it with the skull hammer, revealing an entrance to a cave. When we get inside, there's an inscription of a song on a stone. Of course, that means we'll need to whip out our Wind Waker and we can play the song on the stone and learn the Wind God's aria. When we do so, Fado of the Kokiri tribe appears out of thin air. He tells his story of long ago and that we need to find someone with an instrument similar to his, which will be his descendant. We'll then have to teach the song we just learned to the descendant as Fado leaves. Now, if you paid attention when I reviewed the Forbidden Woods, you would know that the Koroks are actually descendants of the Kokiri, so off to the Forest Haven we go. When we arrive, we can talk to the Deku Tree, but he's got no idea where Makar is. By the way, if you haven't figured it out, we gotta find Makar because, I mean, what other Korok would we be looking for? The Deku Tree then gives us a little tip though to try and find Makar, and that's to just listen for the sound of him playing the violin. If you were actually observant, unlike me, you could see some music notes popping out near a waterfall towards the front of the Forest Haven. Using the grappling hook, we can launch ourselves into the waterfall and spot Makar playing the violin. He's down here practicing away for the next ceremony, and he's trying to keep it a secret from everyone by hiding behind the waterfall. Of course though, we could hear him, so this waterfall really isn't doing a whole lot of work keeping the music quiet. We can pull out our Wind Waker and Makar will ask us to conduct for him as we play the Wind God's aria. While we teach him the song, Fado appears and plays it with us. After the cool little mini concert, Makar becomes awakened and knows his destiny lies at the Wind Temple. All he wants us to do is take him there, so on over there we go. Before departing on the island, the King of Red Lions once again gives us a little tutorial on how to use Makar in the dungeon. Once we enter the cave, we can play the Wind God's aria right where we learned it, which opens up the pathway to the Wind Temple. As always, we gotta start by talking about the dungeon music. This one's honestly got kind of a forest vibe to it, which makes sense because it kinda acts as a second forest dungeon. At the same time though, it also gives off Ocarina of Time Spirit Temple vibes. I mean, that honestly kind of ends up being what the dungeon is, but nevertheless I like the theme as a whole. It really adds to the wondrous atmosphere of the Wind Temple. The very first room has nothing but a door leading to the next area. The real first room has a Wizrobe, a Stalfos, and a couple of tutorials to things we'll be doing throughout the dungeon. There's these little patches of dirt that are scattered throughout the dungeon that only Makar can interact with. Just like with Medley in the Earth Temple, we can use the command melody to take control of Makar. If we walk up to the patches and press A, Makar will throw some seeds into it, which quickly sprout a tree. Do that for both of the soil patches and a chest will spawn in containing an orange rupee. There's also these little metal springs that only go down whenever you equip the iron boots, and you'll have to take them back off in order to be launched up. In order to get to the other side of the room though, we need to get rid of this wind blocking the way by using Makar to hold down a switch. We can combine the springs and the Deku Leaf to make it over to a door. Through that door, we come across some Armos that could be taken out with ease and a switch that can only be activated using the Deku Leaf. Doing so makes this wall move, allowing you to get to the other side of the room where there's more soil patches to plant trees. Once both trees are planted, the door to the next area becomes accessible. In here, there's a bunch more patches of soil, which means of course we can plant a bunch more trees. When we plant the final tree, a couple of doors unlock and some floor masters pop out of the ground to steal Makar. Luckily, to the right is a newly unlocked door that takes us to the closest thing to a central room in this dungeon. As we walk in, we can take out a couple of the worst enemies to ever be introduced in a video game, and also we can find Makar being locked in a little cell to the left. He tells us that the stone blocking the entrance can only be moved if we're as heavy as the Deku Tree. Well, while we could be that heavy with the iron boots, we don't have a way of pulling the stone down. Instead, we need to continue onwards by taking a door that's being guarded by a couple of Armos Knights. Through here, there's even more P-hats and these floors that you can break with the iron boots. Down here, there's a floor master and one of these wind switches from earlier that allows us to cross to the other side of the room on the upper floor. Using one of those heavy springs, we can make it back to that upper floor. As we make our way across to the other side, we can spot a chest that gives us a joy pendant. Over here, there's even more P-hats, a stone with the Wind God's aria inscribed on it, and a door to a new area. In that new area, we can use the Deku Leaf along with some wind coming out of the ground to make it up to a platform with a switch allowing us to continue exploring. As we keep on exploring, there's a very annoying Wizrobe, and all the way on the other side of the room is a chest containing the dungeon map. Okay, so this is kinda random, but I love the fact that we get to use the Deku Leaf throughout the entire dungeon. It's probably my favorite item to use in the game, and it's super cool that items that were used in earlier dungeons get brought back. That's probably one of my favorite parts of the Wind Waker. A lot of times in Zelda games, items you get are usually just one and dones, but you'll find yourself remembering old items a lot in this game. We can continue onward using the wind and the deck relief to keep traveling through the area when we come across a whole lot of P-hats and a Wizrobe. Past them is a door leading back to the central room. This puts us at a higher elevation in that room where there's a switch that can only be activated with the iron boots. When pressed down, the floor in here opens up, revealing a whole new area to explore. As we descend down, we'll eventually come across a chest containing the compass. This is actually one of those rare instances where I didn't forget to get the compass because for some reason that's something that usually happens whenever I make these videos. We'll come back down here a couple of times, but for now there's just a door we can enter. In here, there's some spikes blocking a chest and a bunch of breakable floors. What's so cool about this room is that down below, depending on which floor you break, different enemies will spawn in. I really think it's such a cool feature that makes this dungeon stand out that bit more. What we actually have to do in this room though is move 2 blocks into the right places so that we can use a spring to get out of here. When we take the spring, we get brought up to a chest containing a small key. While we could move on through the dungeon, there's a neat secret in this room. If you break all the breakable floors, a new chest will spawn near the other chest. Doing all of them at once will spawn in a whole bunch of enemies, so if you suck at the game, it's probably best to do it one by one. Once we do get over to the chest, we're gifted with a treasure chart. I just love how unique and creative this room is. Now we can head back to the previous room where on the other side is a locked door that when unlocked takes us to a mini-boss. While I've honestly liked a decent bit of the dungeon up to this point, I gotta say, this mini-boss kinda sucks. It's a red Wizrobe, and he immediately spawns in a normal Wizrobe and a Dark Nut. I don't like this boss simply because it feels like they just threw random stuff together. Also, I really find Wizrobes annoying to fight, so having to fight 2 of them isn't particularly fun to do. Especially since sometimes they spawn in these demons from hell itself. While a lot of the mini-bosses in this game are just normal enemies, I wish they could have done something a bit better for the final true dungeon in the game. Anyways, once everyone in the room is defeated, a chest spawns in the middle of the room containing the item of the dungeon, the hookshot. It is so nice to finally have this thing, as it's one of my favorite items in all of Zelda. If you don't know what this glorious thing does, it lets you hook onto certain objects and brings you towards them. We can use the hookshot in here to get up to a mini pillar that we need to hit with the skull hammer to get out of the room. In the central room, we can climb all the way back up to Makar using the hookshot. It'll take a decent bit honestly, but you'll eventually make it up there, I promise. When we do get up to the little Korok, we need to equip our iron boots and then use the hookshot on the stone, freeing Makar. I actually like this feature of the hookshot, but I wish it was used a bit more in the temple. Now with Makar, there's a lot of things we can do now, but first we need to head back to the bottom of this room to plant a few seeds. When both trees are grown, this fan at the bottom of the room turns on, which will be useful later. Now let's head on back to the room where Makar was originally captured. This time, a Wizrobe has decided to make this room his home, which you know I love to see. Using the hookshot, we can actually travel up to him using these trees. Once he's defeated, we can grab Makar and head through another door. The next room has a whole bunch of blue bubbles that we'll need to take out before doing anything else. Once they're out of the way, you can fly around the room as Makar and plant a whole bunch of trees to hookshot to. At the top of the room is a floor master and a door leading to a higher area in the central room. Up here, there's 2 switches that when held down open up a gate, allowing us to traverse around up here. Using the fan we activated earlier, we can glide over to a whole lot of other areas, with the first one being on the left. There's just a chest sitting over here containing a joy pendant. We can also use the fan to glide on over to a door leading to a room with a bunch of Armos inside. It can be a little tricky to take them all out, but if you use the hero's bow, they won't be much trouble at all. Once they've all been dealt with, a room opens up revealing a chest that contains a small key. Now we need to head on back to that stone with the Wind God's aria on it. Of course, when we play the Wind God's aria with Makar, the stone explodes and reveals a door. Through that door, we can come across 3 Dark Nuts to fight. Now, if you want to talk about what should have been the mini-boss, these 3 fellas right here should have replaced that red Wizrobe. They're so much more fun to fight, and they can be a bit challenging, but not in an annoying way. Once all 3 of them have been defeated, a room opens up revealing a colorful chest that contains the big key. With the big key now acquired, we of course have to go and find the boss room. The only place for us to go is at the bottom of the central room. It seems like it would be impossible to get all the way down here with the fan on, but luckily using Makar and a switch we can get Link down here no problem. Down here is a locked door that leads to a room with a Wizrobe and some Stalfos. The Stalfos are of course fun to fight, but I'm getting sick and tired of these Wizrobes. They're not quite at P-hat level, but they're still pretty annoying. Once the enemies are dealt with, we can use our hookshot to climb numerous platforms on the side of the room, leading to a switch that can be held down with the iron boots, unlocking the next area. Through the next door, there's a bunch of bokoblins and a couple of Armos Knights for us to fight. Once they're out of the way, we can use the command melody to fly Makar to the other side of the room and plant a tree for us to hookshot onto. On the other end of the room is a floor master and more mini spawns of Satan for us to defeat. With them gone, we can enter the door to the final room before the boss. There's 3 blocks, 3 blade traps, and some heavy wind that's going to make getting to the other side a pain. What we need to do is put these blocks in front of the blade traps to prevent them from hurting us. Right before the third one though is a gap that we need to fill in with one of the blocks, making us only have 2 blocks to stop 3 blade traps. What you need to do is use the first block to stop the first 2 blade traps and use the other one to stop the last one. I was a bit confused here at first, but after a bit of trial and error I was able to to get to the other side. Once we reach the other side with Makar, we can spot a Wind God Zarya stone, which of course we need to blow up by serenading it with the song. Once the stone explodes, it reveals a door that we can use the big key on to enter the boss room. When we first enter, we have to jump on what I originally thought was Bongo Bongo's drum, but it's just a bunch of sand. When we get to the sand, more sand starts to pour into the room, and out of the sand, the boss of the Wind Temple, Mulgara, appears. As is tradition, we must talk about the boss's theme before anything else. While, spoiler alert, I'm not the biggest fan of this boss, I really do enjoy its theme. The flute melody is so whimsical, and when it has support, it makes the theme even more epic. It, like almost every song in the Wind Waker, is an absolute banger and gives the boss a little boost. But oh boy does it need that boost, because this is one of the weaker bosses in the game in my opinion. In order to attack Mulgara, you have to use the hookshot on his tongue and then you can attack it with your sword. He'll also throw out some Mulgara larvae during his antics as well. Now these guys are super annoying to me. Not nearly as much as the Wizrobes or Peahats, but they definitely didn't feel like they were a fun addition to the boss. Mulgara won't always stay in the sand though, as sometimes he'll pop out and fly around. The more I talk about it, the less I like this boss. It just really feels like a flat end to a decent little temple. After Mulgara is defeated, we can collect our patented heart container and the middle of the Triforce symbol begins to glow. When we walk towards it, Makar shows up, jumping around and getting all excited. With no words exchanged, both Link and Makar whip out their instruments and play the Wind God Zarya. Even Fado was nice enough to join us in our little mini concert. When the song is complete, the rest of the power that we needed to give the Master Sword is given, and Link for the third time in this game makes the stupidest face ever. Makar says that he's gonna stay here and pray as we take the light back up to the surface to go and defeat Ganondorf. And that's the end of the Wind Temple. The dungeon has so many things that make it great, but at the same time, so many things I don't like about it. For starters, I really like the atmosphere of the temple and the music used throughout is amazing. The wind puzzles are all pretty cool, but honestly, they could have done a bit more with them. This is the longest dungeon in the game, and while it does have quite a few rooms, it's mainly just long because of how tedious it can be at times. I really liked having Medley around in the Earth Temple, but Makar honestly doesn't add that much to our time here. If anything, he just feels like a chore to take everywhere. The constant tree planting isn't a fun gimmick, and it just feels like it's there to pad out game time. Oh, and do we even have to talk about the bosses here? I mean, I can understand why some people might find Mulgara fun, but it's just not for me. Now, if for some reason you enjoy fighting the red Wizrobe and his little minions, then I don't even know what to say. I understand that this game didn't have the longest development time, but it just feels like there's a few things here that they just put to make the game feel a bit longer. Still though, even with my complaints, I'm gonna give the Wind Temple a grade of B. It doesn't compare to the Earth Temple or even the Tower of the Gods, but it's still a decent little temple with some cool ideas. I feel like this temple could have been a whole lot better if it had been given more time. It's not one of the greatest temples in Zelda history, but it's still a pretty good one. Well, there you have it. There's every dungeon in the Wind Waker reviewed and graded. If you made it this far, I hope you enjoyed the video, and hey, I might as well try to convince you to subscribe. It would mean a lot to me and would help me continue to grow the channel. I know recently I've been talking about how Twilight Princess is next up for the Temple by Temple series, but while I was finally starting to play through the game, I realized just how ugly the Wii game looks, so instead I'm gonna wait till I can pick up the HD Wii U version. Sorry about that, but I'll still be doing other content that I'm sure you're gonna love. I just want to thank you guys so much for all the support that's been shown on the series. You have no idea how much it means to me to see all these people watching my content. Again, if you enjoyed, subscribing is the best way to support me, and if you want to leave a comment, I'll most likely respond or interact in some way. Of course though, I have to give a very special shout out to the one and only Jickbean loyalist, Alice in Elden Ring. Alright, that's gonna do it for me. Have a phenomenal rest of your day, and we'll be seeing ya.